Hello, everybody. I am Alper Markov. Welcome to A History of Horror and the Art of Magic. So thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce my honored panelists. We got, starting from the stage right, Vorthos Mike.
Hello, everybody.
Mike is he's an art expert extraordinaire.
Yeah, I do a lot of art stuff for Magic, from curating art shows. Sorry we don't have an art show here. There will be different Magic cons that have them. People have seen them in the past. We do more of those, and I work with some people, founded the art market, do other arty things behind the scenes. But happy to be here today to talk about horror. To my right.
This is one of the original 25 Magic the Gathering artists, Anson Maddocks.
Hello.
And I want to say that Anson was kind enough to bring the original Llanowar Elves. That will be here, so if you guys want to come and look at it up later. And Animate Dead, apparently, which was a surprise to me. Did not realize a couple of alphas were popping up. Then next we have one of the newer additions to Magic.
Not armed.
Next we have one of the newer artists to Magic, but one of the more enjoyable, wonderful ones, Phil Stone. Say hi, Phil.
Hey.
And next these are the people that really made this responsible, that really helped this happen. This is the Nitpicking Nerds, Mia and BZ.
Guys.
Hello. I'm sure you've heard of them. Okay. So we're going to start off, basically, because we have Anson here. So this is the first vampire from Magic the Gathering. Now, am I wrong in assuming, Anson, that the Nosferatu was a bit of an inspiration to this?
Yeah. What I got for the card description was vampire. It became singular vampire later, but I wanted to depict I didn't realize that how many expansions were going to be following the first edition, so I thought I was just doing an archetypical vampire, and to me, the Nosferatu was pretty close to that. So it resembles that, but it's also very jaundiced, very, very yellow.
I was going to say, we don't have it here live, but he also did Animate Dead, one of the famous ones, but apparently we do have it here.
You
live.
do have it here. Did I mess up your...
No.
I really wish you hadn't have brought the Animate Dead. It's like, Anson, come on. This one is, you can't talk about horror without Living Wall. There is a surprise in Living Wall, right? You can confirm.
A surprise.
There is a surprise in Living Wall that can be confirmed, right?
All right, well, so it was the first card to be censored, but I think it was unnecessary. There was a sphincter. Listen.
It was the 90s.
It was surrounded by teeth, and the idea was it was an esophagus.
Mm-hmm.
And but there were rumors in the production, and Jesper asked me if he could censor it, and I was, okay. If anybody else had asked, I would have had a problem with it. But he used the blur tool and kind of wiped it out. Didn't necessarily make it look any less censorable, but
no, because Living Wall is very living.
Which version is that? Because the one I was thinking of, I think you can see more of the bottom of the image.
Yeah.
But
summer version, is that the name of it?
Yeah, it's like the summer revival.
Oh, okay.
I see a living, I guess would be the word for it, but. So I learned I learned this from Anson when I did an interview with him. Why Llanowar Elves was always so terrifying. I remember seeing the original art and being rather frightened by this elf. And Anson, maybe you can give us the little story that you had with the design of the elf, as it were.
Well, if you ask an artist any details about their work, they might embellish it a little bit because it's the first time they've ever really thought about these details.
Or had a brilliant idea.
That might be what I was suggesting to you, that I was thinking that because it shares a profile with the singular vampire, and I just was doing a little thinking, and maybe an elf was bitten by a vampire, and it affected the elf, but the elf is still tied into the forest, so the forest is actively trying to heal the elf,
Yeah.
and it's just sort of a conflict.
I think it would be an awesome set, right? I mean, like, imagine, like, having vampires taking over. I mean, like, just, like, invading, Dominaria, right? It would be great.
As vampires.
As vampires do.
Yeah.
Except for Sangir, because, he's just a meanie, right? Okay, so next up we got some art from Phil Snow. Now, Phil, you were very inspired by the George Romero film. What was the film that? Remember the film that we were talking about?
Night of the Living Dead?
Night of the Living Dead? No.
Oh, Creepshow.
Creepshow. Tell everybody the Creepshow story that I think was very entertaining.
Okay, so I was 6 when Creepshow came out, being a child of the 80s. And when Creepshow came out, my dad, who really got me into horror when I was little, way too little, and but I was happy he did. So he goes, Creepshow came out, you want to go see it? And I knew it was rated R, and I was like, yeah, let's go. Dad's going to make it happen. My dad was a cop. This guy owed him a favor at the movie theater, and so little Phil got in. And I thought it was a fantastic movie. I was overjoyed because I grew up with, Creepy Magazine, Eerie, Vampirella, all that kind of stuff from Warren Publishing. So to see it up on the screen was great. And on the way out, this guy owed him a big favor, evidently, because I got the movie poster to go home with. Oh, wow. And so I was all happy. I got, a souvenir, saw a great movie. It was rated R with Dad and this and that. So what does my dad do is he tacks it up on my wall right above my bed. And he was like, good night. And later that night, little Phil woke up screaming bloody murder and jumping in the bed, and my mom was pissed. And so the poster came down. And but yeah, that film has like a special place in my heart because, I don't know, Dad took me and snuck me into a R-rated movie.
And it probably gave you your first night terror.
No, I've had a few before.
Oh, you had old hat at night terror. This one I particularly love because you said that this one is inspired directly by an artist that we will be talking about in a little bit, but
H.R. Geiger, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you've all heard of him.
So yeah, Watsy gave me a lot of freedom when it came to the T-Rex, and the description they gave me, I can't remember it offhand, but I just remembered I was like, this thing's a xenomorph, and so I melted a T-Rex with elk horns and a xenomorph, so it's kind of like Man-Bear Pig, but but yeah, I got kind of in a little bit of trouble with that one because when I got the original email, it says, okay, we know you're a horror artist, but you can do some gore. I didn't see the some part, I just saw the gore part, and he had to eat these little guys, and so they gave me the reference for the little guys that he had to eat. So the first 3 sketches that I put in, I mean, there was like spines and sinew and blood and everywhere. And I sent it in. I was all happy and ready to go to ink it. And they're like, we can't print any of this. So they're like, he can eat one guy. Let's pretend the other 3 got away.
And gelatinous cube. Am I wrong to think that was inspired by the Blob?
Oh, absolutely. That's what a gelatinous cube is. It sucks you in.
Yes. I mean, and I think that really. As far as remakes go, I think it's probably one of the best. I mean, I don't know. That's just my thought.
That was the scariest card I ever did.
Really?
Well, I mean, my first game of D&D was in 1982, and that's what inspired me to do art. So doing the Forgotten Realms and Baldur's Gate, I'm playing with my childhood, and I'm also playing with one of the most iconic creatures. And there's 3 things that are always in a gelatinous cube: a broken sword, a treasure chest, and a skeleton. And I was like, I did not want to be that guy. And they're like, oh, look, Phil just has no imagination. So I gave it a face, and out of the skulls and the gaping maw of a mouth, and there is a treasure chest just for...
Yeah, because,
Inclusions.
Yeah. Somebody was after something, and they got, more than they
didn't make it
for. So Phil doesn't like to name his paintings. He often just dashes this out. I called this one Reprisal. I was listening to Tori Amos's cover of Raining Blood.
I had to look that up, by the way. It made me bust out the dictionary.
It's good, right? You can very much see the Creepshow inspiration here. Now I'm gonna turn this over to Vorthos Mike.
Yeah.
Right?
So great examples. We had some of the original. Where did horror come in Magic? And we didn't start out with My Little Pony. We started out pretty spooky from the get-go. But just for people to really understand, when they name cards, it's not from the start. Usually it's the concept of the card, and then you name it after the fact. So often knowing, well, what is horror? When you think about it, your first thought is, well, it's film. Right, but that's actually not where horror started. And to give us a basis here is, well, it's not just more fear, it's not more terror. There actually is easy definitions you can look up, but for the group here, I really want you to think of these as like steps in what you do. And there are cards that then represent those things happening. So fear is not just, can't be blocked by black or artifact creatures. Fear itself is really just that constant feeling that something is certainly going to happen. Not maybe, that's just a worry. Fear is something will happen, right? It's not happening, it will happen. Compared to a terror is you're experiencing it, but you can't see why. So the card terror, for example, they're not seeing why it's happening. They're just immediately getting killed right away. Whereas something that would have fear and be aware of the fear is why terror can't kill things that are black or artifacts, because they're aware of what the terror is. So that's why that card is named like that, because it is a continuum. They aren't terrified of something because black cards know what it is, so they're not killed by it. Whereas horror is that next step more, and this is where you have the visceral reaction. This is the seeing something or tangibly experiencing something, the hair on your neck, you have a physical reaction because it is there. The scary clown is in your bedroom. Like, you can see it, you can smell it, you can touch it. Multiple senses are involved. So from that, it's a visceral reaction. You can jump ahead here. And this basis is in our brain. Like, we actually have a single region, and that's that. You go ahead. The amygdala, tiny little piece there, and they've done studies on this to say, like, how easy are you frightened of things, right? You can show some spooky things, but it's the intangible things of, have you experienced terror? Have you had trauma? Do they get heightened because of those things? And they looked at it politically to see, is there anything on the left and the right? And there actually is a correlation. For people that are more conservative leaning, their area reacts slightly more. That's why crime in cities tends to be on one political spectrum. It's physically within you into your visceral reaction. It's not something you think about, it just happens. So they're still doing studies on these sort of things, but they're starting to notice those, that it's not always learned, it's just within you, which is interesting in our current political climate. From there, the other first place this happened, obviously, is in our brain, but it starts of where we were as humans. Like, we didn't have film in 400 BC. Like, that didn't exist. Weird. Cave paintings on the wall. It's the Uncanny Valley. So at the time when, Homo sapiens were around, Homo erectus and the Neanderthals, you would notice something about their face, but it wasn't the same as you. Something's wrong. It's like when you see those kind of lifelike robots, but it's close to human emotions, but you find it a little revolting. We're like, ooh, that's not right. Something's not wrong right here. Kind of like when we look at AI art, similar concept. Too many fingers.
Yeah, Phyrexian on Life.
Phyrexian on Life would be one great example. It's close. They're trying to mimic it, but it's not. It's different. So the evolutionary advantage was there's something wrong with you. You may be diseased. You may have something, ulterior motives, and thus I become scared of it. And to protect myself from it was our really first instinctive things of horror as humans. So moving on ahead, you can actually see, the skulls for the different evolutionary psychology, which, we have 50 minutes. They won't give us too much time. We tried to get a 2-hour talk, but no, you can have so many things. But that cognitive conflict was one of our first instances of horror, of, I don't know why, but this is wrong, and it's in front of me here. This is, I have to get out and flee instead of having war. So from there, we could jump ahead, and Steve Belladin's wonderful sea monster here.
By the way, BZ, does that one not scare the hell out of you?
This one's no good.
It's no good.
That's not going to work.
Super spooky. So some of our first...
Theros.
Yeah.
Theros.
Theros is based on Greek history. So when we look at, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was slightly before, they had forces of nature. They had monsters there. From the Iliad had ghosts that were not always friendly ones, to the Odyssey, where they had giant animals that, were trying to destroy your boats. That's largely what we came through as stories, is how we experienced terrifying things for moral learnings, pre-Christianity, but those have all continued. So you can jump ahead here. So we can see of Medusa was a story, and it's this scary character that could kill you. Like, there were pieces of there that they taught to kids to make horror and terrifying things a little more approachable. So you'd be prepared in life for those pieces.
And like, I've always loved what Wes Craven said about horror films, horror and genre. He said that horror is boot camp for the psyche. And I think as civilizations have become more civilized, some of the things that scared the hell out of us are not necessarily jumping around anymore. We don't have to be as afraid of the dark as we used to, but we still have that urge to be scared. It's still something that we need to exercise. So we create these stories to scare the crap out of each other, to keep each other on our toes.
Like the sickos in the room right now who like the horror.
Yes,
we appreciate all of them.
But the best sickos.
Of course.
Horror fans
love it.
are just. My mom's always like, how can you be into that terrible stuff? I'm like, I'm a gentle soul.
You're not into the terrible stuff. You're into your ability to recover from it or to distance yourself from it.
Absolutely.
And that's where you can classify it as entertainment.
Right.
Because we can all be entertained by our ability to keep ourselves away from that.
Right.
Nobody wants somebody else, if they're a good person, they don't want somebody else to actually experience horror.
Yes. That's absolutely true.
They want to be able to play around like they're immune to it.
Yeah, like the Jungian shadow kind of thing.
Exactly.
You're getting in touch with your dark side, which I think as Magic players, we probably all are. Yeah.
Okay, you can jump ahead too. Yep. So this obviously we have our Medusa example, Chris Ron here, archetype, and then little Caravaggio, similar piece. But the impact that we had on both of these characters as a Gordon or Medusa is the same. Hasn't changed in a few thousand years. We still have them around today. And even in Magic, one of our main planeswalkers, it's our girl, Vraska. Continues that sort of, turns people into stone, just like the Greek story. So that's fantastic. So from that, we've had these folklore stories, would be a good way to describe them. And my father actually studied this. So when he was in Germany, where a little kid was there, growing up, there were pieces that you taught moral lessons to, and often it was in between Christian stories, because obviously Germans are a lot of Christian folk there, and that would be the Grimm fairy tales, which would be how you taught about don't go to the woods by yourself, don't have
good advice.
Maybe not take food from random people, with on the side of a white van. Don't do that. But it provided those safe spaces, and then they became repeated and repeated and repeated. And what my father did was find the Grimm fairy tales that weren't used. So that as we know them, that actually isn't the story that they had in Germany. There were a multitude of them. And Grimm said, all right, these three are similar. They all use the glass slipper. They all use this thing. Let's do this as the through line. But there were obscure ones. Everyone gets baked into a pie, things of the sort if you go into the woods by yourself. There you go. Obviously, Magic used that too. But we were studying the obscure ones that were brought back into modern contemporary Germany. And from there, Innistrad as a world, we based a lot on that Prussian folklore culture, which some of them you can directly repeat, but other ones, they're just spooky at night. The buildings are spooky. They just are. You don't got to do much to them. You just copy what the City Hall looks like in Bavaria, and you're good.
Right. I come from Naples, Florida, and trust me, there's not any mini marts that are terribly terrifying at midnight. It's the 7-Eleven is it's not even it's
candlelit.
Yeah. Pretty much. That's pretty apt.
So the big change that happened in horror as we see it before we get to film. Film is really the big point where we all understood, okay, this is a horror, this is how we're working on those pieces. And if you jump ahead, this type of painting, and really when he started to show vampires, right, these 19th century stories of the aristocrat that had to be invited into your house, but only by invite. So you had to wonder, that means they invited themselves into people's houses. Like, you got to think, if you're a poor farmer, your baron would just come into your house. So you write a story about a vampire having to be invited in. So you had real-life examples, and then they had stories around them. And then eventually, there was a seminal examples, like a Bram Stoker, things of the sort. But those things were just in villages of like, the evil landowner. And you're like, they are, right? But those sort of things then just kind of permeated and grew into a story. When there was enough of a common knowledge, you moved into that. Art was doing the same thing here in this 19th century, where instead of us showing Greek morals and pastoral fun scenes of Rome, buyers stopped buying them because they already had them. They needed something new. So this is in 1820. This is Delacroix. And what they showed was a current event. And why this is horror, it wasn't a story about, the Medusa. It was a current event that was happening. And that at the time in 1820 was almost as fast as a photo could be. So what's the most horrible thing to someone living in a pre-industrial age was war. War was by far the most horrific things because there's innocent bystanders. So they showed, this is the Ottomans, and it showed this idealized version of the West, the French, helping out the Greeks, because the Greek tragedies, the Greek paintings, so it was of the same style, but it was transitioning more to, this is our people against an invading force. And you could see the ramifications of what are happening of parents being murdered and an indifferent horde against you. Obviously, there's some pretty heavy racial implications of that time. It is 1820, let's be real. But that changed what was seen as depicted and people would purchase in art, and it gave this scary thing they'd have in your home or your giant palatial mansion, and that started off our more contemporary version of what horror is. And people sought it out instead of using it as a teaching tool. So,
and things have changed, though. Now things that, this is personally me, things I sought out. I'm a big fan of Daddy Markov. I heard he's getting reprinted.
He is. He's less hot, though. He's less hot.
He is? Is he still like Viagra, Edgar?
I mean, he still looks good, but he doesn't look as good.
Oh,
yeah. Well,
I mean, he's never going to look better than this.
Yeah.
You have to do some exhaling. Ride the roller coaster.
And yes, and by the way, afterwards, if you want to come back, that is the original Volkenbaga vampire token.
Yep.
Cool.
There is, unfortunately, you can't see Edgar's bust. It would be bust.
Bust, yeah, like a sculpture.
Yeah.
They always crop in. The good stuff.
You can't cut. No, Daddy Markov's bust. This was actually me taking it at the bottom with my Hound of Hell.
Yep, it's a doggo.
Her name is Lottie. She's vicious. So we also have the. I want to say a little bit about Olivia Valderin. I think, as far as magic goes, she might be the most psychotic. I think of all. I think we got Liga Schmilskarn here. The flavor text. Forget your human ancestors. You're part of my family now. I mean, she's demented in the best way possible. But I also think this one now, as far as magic goes, I mean, when they say less gore, it's like, wow, things really changed. But the flavor text is so vicious. Don't touch a drop, not yet. I want to watch this so-called Slayer's last crisis of faith. It's just gnarly. Gnarly. This is the art director from the newest set, Duskmourn.
Hello, Vegas. Great to be here, even if it's virtually.
Can you tell us about the evolution of Valgavoth as a villain?
So I had a brainstorm with them. How's Valgavoth gonna do? What's it gonna like? I put together a meeting to work with all the concept artists. I said, if you want to come. If you're doing only environments, maybe you want to pay attention to the design of Valgavoth once we put it together. We almost didn't do the moths because we were worried it was too common or something like that. Or maybe because it wasn't going to stretch over a whole set. It was going to be hard to make it over a whole set. So, you always question yourself. You take a look at all the angles.
What were the emotions that you had working on Duskmourn in such a horror-centric set?
So, working on Duskmourn was very cathartic. It was harrowing. It was fun. We had a lot of fun with the set. There's so much scary stuff, you start making a lot of jokes. There was a moment when John sent a sketch for the skull crab. And we were like, oh my God, what's on your mind? this is a complicated work of art. The whole set. Uh, just like a movie, it relies on many, many talents. It relies on the skill of many artists and writers and game designers. We came together to make what to us was an expression of what's relatably scary now to us.
And who were some of the inspirations that you felt were integral to the creation of the set?
I always bring personal elements to my sets. I love putting in references or influences from art that has shaped me as a professional. And in this case, thinking about Remedios Varo, Beksinski, Leonora Carrington, the alchemist of the canvas. Many
Well, it looks like we lost a video. Sorry about that, people. This just want to give a shout out to Ovidio. He is also an incredible artist too. This piece is. I mean, what would you describe this like?
See, normally still lifes have food that you want to eat. I mean, unless you're from Wisconsin here, I don't know if that'd be your thing.
The Ed Gein.
Yeah.
Yum yum.
Yeah. Quite.
So Valgavoth, I mean, I was excited by the design of it. I mean, and what's really cool about it is that it is distinctly different from Innistrad, right? Because Innistrad's like a lot of purples, and it's got this very Lovecraftian kind of vibe. Like here we have the very traditional Lovecraftian angel, but we'll be getting to another Eldrazi angel in a moment. So just the design that was influenced here I found fascinating. I also found it interesting that there was an actual Voldaren pariah, that Olivia found somebody that was too much for her to handle. This is just the example that H.P. Lovecraft had over the horror genre. Now, I mean, the man was racist for, like, even his time. I mean, he hated a lot of things, but I think if I could talk to him today, I'd say, touch grass, buddy, just touch some grass. But, what can I do? This is the first printing of Shadows over Innsmouth, which you guys would probably recognize. There's a similar title to a Magic set. There we have our Emrakul, I think she's misjudged a little sometimes. I think she's misunderstood. Now, we're going to actually get to sorry, I skipped forward. We're going to get to the nerds' favorite cards. So, we're going to start with Shadowfeed.
Oh, man. I started playing Magic when I was 12, and this was, like, right around the end of Lorwyn block, going into, like, Shards of Alara block. And I would just, like, open these booster packs, and I didn't have access to the set or anything. I didn't really know much, and I just would get to cards like this. And I just feel like I could imagine in my head very vividly the 2 seconds before this photo was taken and, like, the 2 seconds after.
Oh, God.
It was a lot. I was just like, this is in the game? Like, this dude's getting shredded. And you were talking about, you censored, like, this might look like a butthole or something. This dude is like, this dude's done. He's got intestines flying everywhere. So it was just nasty. And it was definitely my first experience with, like, looking at Magic this way, where I see the game and I go, oh, okay, this can get really dark.
And the flavor text, the future is a snake devouring your life backwards through time. I mean, that's just not something you want to hear.
It was my fault for playing when I was 12, because ages 13 and up. So once I hit 13, I would have been like, yeah, it is a snake. But at 12, I was like, ugh, I don't like this.
A few extra days.
Yeah, a few extra days would have done it for me.
This is another one that you
hate
have,
it.
This gives you the spookies.
I hate it. The scale of this, and I just imagine, like, this is also in that early age, so it probably scarred me to some degree, but I just imagine being in the lighthouse and just, like, I mean, realistically, the guy in the lighthouse is dead anyway. Those waves are way too high for him.
Right.
He's
right.
cooked. But that thing, what was the name for what you said, Mike?
This is actually, BZ and I suffer from this. It's a difficult word, but megalohydrothalassophobia. It basically means we're afraid of giant things that are underwater.
I have an image in my head of like.
Does anybody else have a fear of giant things underwater?
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like the bird's eye view, of like the boat or something, and then you see like the shadow below it. That freaks me out.
I mean, and Steve Belladin just is a master of things underwater that are just. I mean, the moment before destruction.
Scourge of Fleets is another really freaky one.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
And we have beauties.
I also like Ishkana. I think this is not from when I was 12, so it's definitely have more. I think it's interesting to view all of the like creepy crawly stuff that I would normally avoid IRL. I tend to like gravitate towards a little bit of magic because it feels a lot like safer. This is like the most extreme worst case scenario for like dealing with a spider, but something about it, I gravitate towards it, and I like it. I have a whole spiders deck.
Maybe it's her outreached kind of hands-ish. Maybe she's friendly, inviting you to.
I don't get friend vibes. I feel like she would eat me, but I think I feel a lot safer playing in a card game versus.
And this is one of Mia's favorites.
Yeah, this is Carista of Phyrexia. I think that one of the most... It's very funny because this is a horror, both in art and then also when you start playing Magic, everyone's like, you don't play a few things. You don't play poison. You don't play slivers. And then it's like you see the fear in their eyes when you're playing poison. But then also this card is completely like... It's like being made into perfection, but that perfection is so like... disgusting to the human eye.
Yeah.
It's being made in the image of that, and they're like, I want to be this way with the flavor text, but it's being these painful conversions into something that's completely horrific to us, but something so perfect to them. I think that's one of the most horrific things, just like being able to put yourself in those shoes and seeing something along the lines of like that to them is perfect, and you're like horrified that they would even think
right.
that.
It brings to mind like the cult aspect of it is
Yeah.
disturbing. That's why Leah Remini, I love her because
Oh my gosh.
she's stopping Phyrexia.
Oh,
Everybody, I think. Well, I mean, you can't talk about horror and magic without Blood Artist, right?
Gosh, I love Blood Artist. There's so many reasons. I mean, one, I started with Edgar Markov, Daddy Markov, go. But this is one of the most famous vampires, and I think it has this like kind of overall terror where it's like there's so much blood around, so many people have died that they're just using it for art. It's not just food at this point. They could just use it for recreation, and that like cold sinking feeling of just having so much excess is really what makes
like
it
and you're that painting on the floor, which it's a reference to an older painting, correct, Mike?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
What was it called again?
Well, which one?
I can't remember. She was on the beach, right, dreaming or something.
Yeah, there's a few of them that it's based on.
I'm giving a panel, so I should know that. But I don't. But the POV, that's obviously we're the ones being painted. But also the difficult part too is the fact that he has to look so good while doing it.
Yeah,
that's tricky. Also, the very sneaky hanging of the young lady in the background. Like
I never noticed that.
Yeah, it took me very many views before I realized that he's bleeding out someone.
Yeah, and this also seems kind of like voyeuristic because you're at it from like a downward angle looking up.
You are the dead body.
Yeah, it's just so creepy. I really love this art a lot.
Yes.
And this is like one of my favorite cards ever. I think that, the combining of this is like, oh, what could be worse than two angels that are kind of messed up? It's like, oh, one gigantic one that has protection from so much stuff. This is the terror that is flying over that will destroy everything. This is, the combination. This is like the fact that nobody could really stop this from happening. I think that like inevitability is really the biggest terror of this piece.
And I do, and I love the flip side of the cards where you see them getting sick as it's happening. You see them falling to the illness, and then the flavor text is not there, but I believe it was said when Siddhartha saw what happened to her sister, all she could do was weep.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
Which is, heartbreaking. Heartbreaking.
Yeah. The other one...
Oops, sorry.
No worries. I was just going to say the other ones being like they can only see this and they can only hear this. That's just also like...
And I also wonder what kind of shriek is coming out of the two mouth holes. I don't know.
I know they made an effort to show the Eldrazi in the original Rise of Eldrazi, like during the day, And so then when they finally brought it over to Innistrad, they could like bring it into nighttime, and then it really cranked it up.
Yeah, it
really cranked it up.
does. It does. And if you guys ever have a chance to check out Vincent Proce's, he did the design for this. It's just as terrifying if you get a chance to do it. I believe it's in the Art of Magic book.
Yep.
I'm a sucker for those books. I mean, I wish they still made them. They should make them in PDF form.
We're working on it.
Okay. So this is for you, Mike.
This is for me. So, I talked about fear, we talked about terror, we talked about horror. And I brought this piece, and, when I first got into the game, you're scared of the really gruesome things, the bloody things, the bones, the visceral mutilate of sorts. And I started looking at the list. It comes out every Halloween. There's 10 spookiest Magic cards, right? Everybody's always got the thing. There's a new remix of it on YouTube each year. And I started using Scryfall Tagger, which shout out to Scryfall, undefeated as always. And I found this piece. And, as a flavor-derived person, I am Vorthos Mike, that's my jam. I wanted to find something that tells a deeper story and is scarier as you maybe change through life. So as a, 12-year-old, maybe not so spooky, it's just a spirit, who cares? Well, the thing is, when you become a parent, when your kid leaves the house, you get scared every time. You're worried every time. Are they going to come home? Or maybe they say they're going to call at 7 and they don't call yet, and it's 9. That's terrifying. You don't get to actually experience the horror, but it's terror because it's not in front of you.
Right.
This is an ungilded person of Ravnica. This snuck in to the set guild pack. So it's an unaffiliated person. So when we think of the guilds and choose your guild and you're 1 of 10, that's great. Well, the rest of the plane, not everybody's in a guild. There's people that are, unhoused or just random other people. And this you get to see what it's actually like on the ground when there's not a set or you're not going through the maze. Here, you get to learn what Rakdos is actually like. They don't just throw parties. I mean, Dimir, really, they're just librarians. They sound cool, but they're librarians. They handle information. They're very boring. Rakdos is the assassins, but they also do it for sport. So, of the Rusalka set, I tried to find what is the scariest one of a spirit, of just more of a ghost. And by far, showing this, we now saw a few years later, and you can jump ahead here, there was outcry about blessed spirits.
Really?
Oh yeah, on the line of you're showing dead children, and people were viscerally reacting that's kind of squeamish. That's not great, And it's they call them heroes in the flavor text, so they were fighting back against the bad guys on Innistrad.
Yeah, they don't look upset.
They don't. They were heroes in it, and it softened it. Whereas a few years before in Guild Pact, it is raw. But it's also on an uncommon. Less people saw it. The game wasn't as large. Now we see a much larger game. If that was printed today, we'd be immediately written up.
Right. I mean, do you think that the Tree of Perdition from Innistrad might have been influenced by this?
There were some of that, yes.
I
Vincent Prose has mentioned some of those. But this is where the earlier parts of the game, there was horror the whole time. It's just you may not see it until you hit the life stage to be like, oh, I know what that means now. And then that forever changes your top 10 list to maybe, it may not be number 1, but it might be in that 2 to 3, 4 spot.
And the original is actually up here.
Yeah, it's just a little guy right here. So we got a painting up front. So after the show, of course, you can come up and see some painting too. So.
This one is just, Steve Belladin again. You can't go wrong with Steve Belladin. This one does everything that it needs to do to let you know what's going on Mirrodin. I don't know if much more needs to be said about it. It's a knockout. And so here we have Atraxa. Now, I only put this in here because, beside it being awesome, Victor was originally supposed to be on the panel, but he couldn't make it. But I did actually get confirmation that the Atraxa is indeed the Phyrexianized Sunblast Angel. This is from the artists themselves. So yeah, Sunblast, she got done dirty by everybody except for Urabrask.
She got got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're talking about Geiger. This is where I think Magic goes into a lot of the Geiger territory. Glissa, as you will probably know if you've read the novels, it's one of the biggest gut punches in Magic history. You are with this heroine for a long time, and as you can see, things don't end well for Glissa. They don't. But you can't. you can't talk about magic and Phyrexians without referencing H.R. Geiger. Now, this gives you an idea of how brutal the Phyrexians were earlier in the days. If you can see it at the bottom, he has, I don't know what you would say, but I don't know the apparatus, but a head stretcher?
Someone's face?
That's
someone's face.
Someone's face.
Someone's losing a face.
Mm-hmm. And in the Phyrexians research with the grace of surgeons and the finesse of butchers. I mean, some of those flavor texts just knock it out of the park. This one always broke my heart. Like, this one's just mean. This poor little, like, I guess it's a goblin, right?
It's a goblin, yeah.
And then it says Specimen 211, examination report, observation, graph sublimation incomplete, result death, prepare Specimen 212. Like, ugh.
And Anson, you worked on some of the early Phyrexian stuff, did you not? Didn't you have discussions in-house about who they were and what they were about?
Yeah.
I didn't have anything to do with the Phyrexians, I don't
But
think.
didn't you do...
Except for maybe before they became part of the storyline.
Yeah.
But, like, it's like even, not Mishra, was it?
No, they were part of the story. They just weren't fleshed out.
Oh, they just weren't. They're fleshed out. Okay.
Yeah, I think Mishra had them, but they weren't like a thing yet.
This one is Vincent Pross is he's a horror maestro. Right now, he just finished Salem Lot. He just did work on Smile 2, and he did do the creature design for a remake of this. You may have heard of this author. His name is Stephen King, and there was a remake called It that came out a few years ago. He did the creature design for it, independent film. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but what's terrifying about this one is the resolution. You have this group of people that are so ready to take on Emrakul, and then of course things go wrong. But you have a close-up of these people. This is the detail that he puts into it. These people are very clearly here, and it's harder to point, but if you look clearly, there they are in part of the actual, like, I guess it's an ooze, is what they call it. The sad one, the blonde on the left, the reluctant soldier that's just now hanging. And you guys, there is indeed a mother with her child that's wishing, good luck to all the people. And if you look to the left, baby didn't make it. So I don't know. That probably wouldn't fly today, right?
Yeah, it's harder to get in these days.
No. And I before they got just this little aside, before they got rid of the Open the Omen paths, I always had a fantasy that these two children watching us became planeswalkers. Like, this was when they sparked, and they just became Eldrazi hunters. Like, just they grew up and just hunted the Eldrazi. That's my little idea there. So of course we can't talk about horror magic without the references to the actual, real world horror. I do love the fact that they made a sequel card to what is, pretty much the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I love the references to John Carpenter here. I always wondered, why were they bringing that thing back? Maybe they thought it was like crawfish or something, and
They're hungry?
they must have been hungry.
Very hungry, yeah.
But the Awoken Horror, yeah, it's
Seafood boil.
yeah. This is always what I imagined what happened to the people of Innistrad when the thing in the ice actually opened.
Jeez.
Screw you, man.
I would have used a different one.
Son of a...
Jump scares are cheap.
Well, so am I.
Touche.
And that right there is why you don't go and bring things in the ice from the ocean. This one I found interesting. I feel like this was art. This was Stefan Martinet. I feel like they sort of jacked his design for this alien. I mean, this is my personal opinion, but I mean, the similarities, I think, are a little suspicious. And he did such great designs. I mean, it blows my mind that that happened. So, okay, we're going to go into Duskmourn a little bit. Obviously, this has nothing to do with Kubrick at all.
Coincidence.
Yeah, purely coincidence. I love that the Soul Ring actually could be like the ring. And would this be a secret lair? The Sadistic Shell game, I think, has it's reminiscent of Freddy Krueger. Freddy Krueger is all over this set. There's a scene, I couldn't really show it because it's pretty violent, but he turns a young man into a marionette through his veins and makes him appear to have committed suicide. And this is where Freddy is cutting off the strings. Now, this is also reminiscent of the Nightmare on Elm Street posters. And I think that in the front row, the red and green sweater that we got going on there, they're actually, one of the interesting things behind it is the reason why they chose that particular color is because, like, Christmas green and Christmas red, they're lovely. Like, when, like, that color combination is great. But if you mix olive green and red, it's a very unpleasant color to look at. And that was one of the reasons that Wes Craven chose that. There's the little eyeball. Living Phone, well, I'm just going to let this next clip speak for itself.
I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy.
Come back wrong. I think we all might know where this comes from. I'm going to say Evil Dead would be my guess, I think. Evil Dead's a good one.
It probably is.
I thought it'd be like Pet Sematary.
That's true. But you know what's kind of interesting? I know that like Camp Crystal Lake, they didn't necessarily wear yellow outfits, but it has a Camp Crystal Lakeian kind of like, I don't know, kind of outfit going on there. And that's me after when I don't have enough coffee. Okay, I don't know about you all, but in Duskmourn, this one messes with me on a level that is brutal. I mean, the face of the one guy that's getting blown up, I mean, how did they get this one through?
Campbell White is, he's subtle. Good usage of shadow to be like, oh, well, it's just a guy having a good time. And then, once you blow up the art big, you can see details. But that's the good part about having a 2-inch by 3-inch art box size. Sometimes you can put things in there and, they'll get through quality control. And eventually people can see all the fun that's happening there. Because it's not bloody. He's just having a good time with some balloons.
And, some direct references here. We got some It and we got some Junji Ito. I mean, Junji Ito, man. Talk about scaring the hell out of you.
Spooky.
Yeah. This one I love because this shows you how in-depth Magic really went into paying attention to horror in even the most obscure thing. Like, the artist who did the cover artist for this, Josh Newton, he was known for the Fear Street Goosebumps of fame. I also think that that's like totally Debbie Gibson. I'm just going to say.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it is.
Totally Debbie
Hopefully
Gibson.
it is.
I would love to see Debbie Gibson like shooting Ghostbusters. But the fact that they imitated the actual Evil Dead font and yet were still referencing Night of the Comet, which is an incredibly obscure like zombie film. You have to hunt to find it, but it's worth it if you can find it for sure. And I don't know if we all know where this one came from, but I think
It's like a bad dream.
There are worse things out tonight than vampires.
Like what?
Like me.
And there are worse things out tonight than vampires. I think that might be a coincidence.
Yeah, maybe.
Before we end, I just want everybody to actually focus on this because there's a really cool hidden message that I would love everybody to see.